This is Aaron Rice with Concierge and your host for Baltimore Climate Tech 2025. I have the opportunity to have a discussion with my good friend Khalid Malik. Khalid, introduce yourself. Let us know kind of who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron, for having me. Happy to, provide as much insight as we can and let the folks know what's going on in the market. My background is started off in supply chain management, working with Fortune 50 company. It evolved into the green building space. So I've been operating for the past 16 years across the Mid-Atlantic, developing projects ranging from retail, office, recreational, faith-based organizations to multifamily type projects. And so we found the biggest success in Maryland. It's a progressive-minded state, a lot of fertile programs, and they're kind of setting the tone for the rest of the free world. So
And the most aggressive climate law in the country called the Maryland Climate Solutions Now Act. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, at all stages of government, local, state, federal, Maryland's right there in terms of leading all the efforts, providing a lot of frameworks to allow these building owners, operators, and occupants to really make a difference.
hmm So folks, Khalid's being a little humble here. But he and I met Miss Alma Wiggins. She's also one of the presenters in talking about the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. That's a 120-year-old church congregation in Rockville, the oldest, probably the oldest African American church in the area. I don't know Montgomery County, but definitely in Rockville. And so Elma and I have been good friends for many years. And then, I was explaining to her about the building energy performance standard, uh, requirement in Montgomery County. And she said, well, do churches qualify? I said, I think they do. So we did a little bit of research. I was acquainted with the Montgomery County Green Bank kind of all at the same time. And I asked them for a referral for someone that might be able to assist. And so they referred Khalid. And so Khalid got engaged with, I guess it's been a couple of years now, with the church and with helping them with energy audits and those types of things, but not just assisting them with the ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, but also finding the money to pay for it because that could be a five-figure investment that under normal circumstances a faith-based organization would need to come up with that money to do that type of audit. But because of Khalid's skill set, he was able to find the funding to be able to do that. So I kind of know him as the guy that knows how to find the money for deep energy retrofits. So how did you kind of hone that skill and yeah, how did you become that subject matter expert when it comes to finding the money?
Yeah, no, thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate the kudos there. And you've been very instrumental in getting that project started and we're making a lot of progress. Mount Calvary is like a trailblazer for faith-based institutions. And I'm sure the congregation and the trustees are enjoying this journey. But just getting back to, how do we got to this point where I learned how to capital stack.
Hmm
When I came to Maryland back in 2011, 2012, it was like the wild, wild west of lighting retrofits, right? I mean, you had Pepco giving out like $180 to retrofit a four lamp T12 to LED tubes, right? With like 50% margins, right? So imagine, that level of incentive and all the lighting fixtures scattered across Montgomery County. So, just starting out, cutting my teeth in lighting and working with a number of building owners, property managers, really kind of set the tone and allowed me to, develop relationships, not only with the utilities, but with local government, and other type of industry and community partners. So over time, things have just evolved, where I've started getting involved in more resiliency projects, looking at solar, and now we're even looking at geothermal opportunities.
hmm
just like at Mount Calvary, they've got
mhm,
some space that's adjacent to the property that
mhm,
we're considering.
mhm, mhm,
And, of course, MEA, the Maryland Energy Administration, they're supporting those efforts and allowing us to access a number of programs and leveraging their funding to make things happen, right? So just kind of the long and short is just, being in the marketplace, being actively involved in projects, partnering with other community developers is really put us in
mhm,
a position to be attractive in delivering these projects.
mhm. And so, last year we focused last year with Baltimore Climate Tech 2024, we focused on the Maryland Climate Solutions Now Act, Building Energy Performance Standards, otherwise known as BEPS, and focused on commercial properties last year. And I don't know about you, but I found that most of the commercial building owners and corporate tenants that I was engaging with who were occupying properties 35,000 square feet or more within the state didn't even know the law existed. So last year was an effort just to kind of talk about, well, what are best practices across the country for building owners and occupiers to be able to kind of navigate this climate law, which is very aggressive, and faith-based organizations fall into that, and so that's what you and Dr. Kinslow and Elma and Tanaya from the Green Bay were focused on, kind of faith-based organizations. Our theme this year is healthy, smart, high-performance homes, the case for expansion, affordability, and innovation, really focused on the single-family, multifamily sectors. So, and I know you do work in multifamily as well. So I guess I want to kind of turn the conversation to talking maybe about some experiences, maybe pre-January 20th experience when it comes to federal funding, and then post-January 20th experiences to funding that's kind of being snatched back. I guess that's a nice way to say it, but being snatched back. So how do these projects still continue to move forward, and how are you consulting your clients in that regard?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, in my experience, community serving buildings and your traditional commercial office buildings, they got different strategies, right? One's about the people, the other's about the dollar bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at that kind of landscape, with commercial building owners, they're to appeal to them, you got to focus on saving them money, right?
The ROI and the payback.
Right. Absolutely. But then to be a little more detailed, you have to appeal to their sense of, hey, we're thinking about anything to retain tenants and keep the buildings occupied, whether
Mm-hmm.
a commercial tenant or, a residential tenant. The bottom line is always going to get down to the, return on investment. So, part of our strategy and in the absence of any federal funding is looking at other programs to help leverage, any types of upgrades that need to be made that not only improve the operations and maintenance of the facilities, but keep the tenants satisfied as well, right? So when you're looking at, originally over the past 4 years, there's been a lot of um, set aside or government provisions made, I mean, in the billions. And so we focus substantially on, applying for, EPA funding, DOE funding, HUD funding. I mean, there was just a plethora of programs that, came out of the Office of Sustainability. With that drying up as of, recently or being suspended, we've had to get creative in terms of, uh, make sure that we're retaining these clients and meeting their needs, right? And the first thing we like to do is make sure that these projects pencil out even without those federal subsidies, right? When you're talking about resiliency projects and combining those with efficiency projects, you want to look at the bottom line and not necessarily, rely on government subsidies,
Mm-hmm.
but they do help in the decision-making process. It's almost like business as usual, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we make sure that we're taking advantage of existing state and local programs like DHCD as well as MEA, and of course, utility rebates. We're working with, multifamilies ranging from condo associations to affordable housing, uh,
mhm,
as well as senior living facilities, right? They're
mhm,
all unique in terms of their needs, right? Condos, where they have a budget, they have reserve studies, and they qualify as nonprofits, depending on, how their structure is set up. They can definitely continue to take advantage of federal programs like IRA for as long as they exist, right? And some of these condo owners don't know that. These
mhm,
associations, they're like, we have a certain amount of money earmarked for specific purposes. And what we do is we, put together packages that allow them to like reconsider, hey, out of this $400,000 reserve study,
mhm,
we can leverage $100,000 to get another $1 million, just based on the type of project that we have, when you combine, efficiency with resiliency and, so that's just
mhm,
an example of condos,
mhm,
affordable housing. They've got programs they can leverage through Department of Housing and Community Development,
mhm, mhm,
EHOP program. There's also the greenhouse gas program that's been created. And so they've got, a number of resources that are funded through the state that don't
mhm,
rely on federal funding,
mhm,
that makes a lot of these projects, pencil out as well. And then, of course, your senior facilities, that's a different set of needs. And, they're already, the occupants are already um in these living conditions that are very challenging. And
mhm,
when you start working with doing community outreach, we put together like fundraising campaigns to kind of show that need and help leverage those resources as well, right? So there's
mhm,
a different, list of programs that we try to, share with, the different clients to get them comfortable. But at the end of the day, it gets down to trust,
mhm, mhm,
working with these different building owners, operators, property managers. I learned a long time ago, people do business. The 80% of the reason why they do business with you is because they like you, right? So,
right, right. Mhm,
whether it's cultural, economics, you want to make sure that whatever your story is, it's something that they want to hear.
well, I know in tenant occupied properties, and we discussed it quite a bit in other presentations last year. When you've got a tenant occupied property, the split incentive can be a potential barrier. Um, do you experience much of that in your work where you're having to navigate both tenants having one motivation for wanting to do energy upgrades and the owner maybe having another, and just the two shall not meet? How do you overcome the split incentive?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In the multifamily space, owners and managers, they are just concerned about collecting rent. That's their number one thing is driving like, hey, I need to collect this money at the beginning of the month. I'm not really concerned about, energy savings because, in most cases, the tenants are responsible for that, right? Like if
Right. The
depending on
tenants use the electricity. Yeah.
yeah, well, depending if you have like a master metered versus, an individual
Hmm.
metered
Hmm.
space,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you do have some master metered properties where the owner is responsible for covering that, but then they, pass that on through other services like rent, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That once you understand, that structure in terms of who's paying the utility bills, that's going to determine, the strategy in terms of how you split the value, right?
Hmm.
And so what we're developing is a platform to help facilitate, building optimization in these spaces, whether it's a master meter space or an individually metered space.
Hmm.
What this building optimization technology does is it isolates what the activity that's happening in that space. So even if you're functioning from a master meter standpoint, you're able to track the actual consumption in that individual space, whether you call it sub metering. And so from that type of program, we're allowed, we can, once we have the necessary privacy policies in place, because, once you start gathering information, you want to make sure that you have tenant buy-in, right? Because,
Yeah.
it's Maryland has laws, and we're just speaking
Hmm.
about Maryland in general.
Yeah. Hmm.
We're talking about Maryland, but in general, tenants have laws in terms of what you can information you can
Hmm.
share about them.
Hmm. Hmm.
But once we able to get past, the privacy policies, that allows us to kind of create, really track the value that our technology or our services is bringing to the table, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of these, sophisticated energy management systems, we're able to even look at community solar programs in terms
Hmm.
of, allocating a certain percent of buy down, right? Like,
Hmm.
you have these PPAs in place, but, no one should.
Power purchase agreements. Yeah.
Yes, power. Yes, power purchase agreements. That's one, mechanism to help, determine, what the discounted rate is in terms of credit. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
But, so to summarize, you have to have some sort of technology in place to really, really keep track of the usage so that you can document that and share that between the owner or operator and the tenants and let them know what value that you're pulling from it and then kind of assign, what that looks like, whether it be an expense, or if we're, creating a package to attract certain financing
Hmm.
because the owner or the owner may want to take the benefit of the tax credit or the tax
Hmm.
benefit, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Where you may have the residential owner who's knowledgeable about, well, if I'm doing this and I'm doing that, I may be entitled to this, right?
Right.
So all of this has to be settled in some sort of paperwork, right? It gets down to identifying what those opportunities are, what the challenges are, and then coming to terms with all parties involved to make sure that everybody is content with this, new improvement to their space.
Well, I think that's where, to your point, that's where kind of sustainability leasing, kind of green leasing comes into place as well, because, part of the Maryland Climate Solutions Now Act is the building owner needs to report, I guess starting this June, actually, needs to start reporting the energy usage in the building. And if it's a tenant occupied building, there's nothing probably in the current lease that requires the tenant to share their energy data with the owner, which creates that potential split incentive. And so there are anecdotes of some tenants, charging owners for right to this data, and then signing a disclaimer disclosure, just saying, hey, we got this data from a third party, like don't hold me liable if it's not accurate. But that's one of the challenges, and that's where we talked about last year, and a little bit this year, where green leasing, sustainable leasing comes into place as well to be able to help overcome that. But my next question
Well,
is
let me
just,
comment on that
oh,
though.
sure. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
dead right. You're absolutely right. Green leasing is a great term to use, right? I mean, it's a negotiation between. It depends on your position, right? The longer your lease, the more influence you may have, right?
Mhm.
When you're talking about commercial office building spaces, because
Mhm.
you want to do a 5, 10 year lease, well, you want to make sure that you got the right terms and conditions in place,
Right,
right? That
right.
benefit you and your business.
Hmm.
When you're talking about, residential tenants, they're year to year um, you know, uh, they're inconsistent, in terms of what their finances look like. And so you may have the owner and the operator dictating to them what those terms look like, right? And what that benefit is going to be in terms of what's passed down to them.
Hmm.
But to your point, there has to be some written mutual understanding in place to kind of help facilitate that relationship.
Well, Diana Lee runs the Green Leasing Program for the Institute for Market Transformation. She's one of our presenters as well, and her focus this year, I encourage everybody to watch her video as well, was multifamily green leasing. So she gave some really good sample clauses that both the owner and the tenant could agree upon, so that it creates a win-win, situation at the end of the day. I
I
guess
like
my
that. I got to check that out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yeah, no, she brought the heat. So I guess my next question is, when you're doing is it fair to say deep energy retrofits on some of the properties, is there an end goal of a performance standard or a design standard, like a LEED, a well, a Fitwell, a Energy Star? Are you is that the end goal, or what's your opinion of design standards versus performance standards?
Yeah, I mean, Maryland is a policy-driven market, right? I mean, you've got all these different certifications, LEED, Energy Star, Passive House. I
And
mean,
you're a lead AP, so
yeah, yeah, I have a designation.
mhm.
It allows me just to get into the door, but you still have to deliver, right?
The
Um,
piece.
so we're really focused on these EUI targets and these carbon goals that the state has, right? Because once you're focused on that, then the others kind of fall within the compliance realm, right?
Mhm,
Um, with June 1st being the benchmarking due date, you've got a lot of building owners, operators that, to your point earlier, they're just not aware of what's happening, right? So, what we're doing is we're creating a community outreach program, working with university students
mhm,
to really look at that list of 9,000 plus buildings and create learning opportunities.
mhm,
Part of some of the curriculum that we're doing, that we're putting together for some of the local universities is going to focus on, sustainability in the built environment. And of course, Maryland being a, building energy performance standard state, with mandates and specific, targets, it helps to kind
mhm,
of, make the outreach more, the building owners more receptive to
mhm,
outreach.
mhm,
I think maybe about a third of the buildings have complied
mhm,
with benchmarking.
mhm,
So we looked at this as a great opportunity to get students involved, to help the building owners, hit these certain targets. And then we talk about, oh, you're at this particular um, consumption where you qualify, you may, like in terms of Energy Star, right? Like
mhm.
with the program that we're offering with these deep energy retrofits, you're at 65. If you include this building optimization technology, it'll get you to 75, and
Right.
you'll be able to certify your building, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
but the first thing is, educating the business community about what's going on, getting the students involved, and really just delivering a package that makes sense based on their budget.
Man, I've got more questions than we have time, unfortunately. I mean, we didn't even get a chance to talk about all the work that you're doing at HBCUs across the country, specifically, Morgan State and some others in the region. We'll probably have to talk about that later at another time. But I think the final question that I have for you is, the Aggie pride that you bring to the table. Talk about how your experience at North Carolina A&T prepared you to be kind of where you are and doing what you're doing right now.
Wow. I mean, those were just some of the best times I had, from a social standpoint. When you're at an HBCU like A&T, you're in there to have a good time, and then, reality hits you like I really need to make something of myself, right? So I was one of those guys on the 5-year program because I did partying my first year. But then, reality set in, and, I made the best of my opportunity. I studied logistics, transportation, supply chain management. I was surrounded with, great faculty that put the students first. And, with that kind of foundation, it allowed me to feel like I can accomplish and do anything, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And until this day, I still, keep in contact with a lot of my classmates. They're all doing some pretty uh, serious business out here. And this space that we're in now is certainly something that has a lot of room for growth.
mhm.
I just want to, let the young adults know that, it's all right to be into building science, right? Like
Right.
everybody doesn't
Mhm.
have to be an entertainer, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with getting entertained, right?
Right.
But look, there's so many other uh, you know, um,
Career paths.
opportunities out
Yeah.
here to help develop you professionally. And,
Hmm.
I'm really, 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 happy to be working with Morgan State, working with the students, and just HBCUs in general.
Khalid, thank you so much. I appreciate it. How do people get in contact with you? I know I'll put put your contact information on the screen, but what's the best way to do it? Is it a website? Is it an email? If so, holler it out.
We have a slide here that's got all the contact information on it. You know, you can reach me directly at 240-281-8857. Email me if you're interested in partnering with us. You know, we're doing great things and would love to have you on our team.
Absolutely. Hey, this is your second year participating in Baltimore Climate Tech Plus, and I appreciate your time, subject matter expertise, and your thought leadership on the topic, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right, have a good one.